Well, who'd have thunk it? Mega boxing deja vu as Eubank Ben rolls around once more for a second attempt. However, this time it's bigger, bolder and badder, baby. The eggs are going to be flying about in Tottenham Stadium on April 26th with a juicy undercard to go along with it. Get your popcorn ready, as they say, but how can we natter about this fight without delving into the history? Yes, let's travel back in time to the 18th of November 1990. The fathers were two of the biggest names in boxing. The Dark Destroyer Ben was a brute force in the ring with a never give up attitude, along with a terrifying 25 knockouts from 28 fights. However, he did have that one blemish on his record given to him by the formidable Michael Watson in 1989, but he would then redeem himself going on to win the WBO middleweight title against Doug Dewitt less than a year later. Soon after this, he found himself with a complete disdain for the man in front of him, Mr. Chris Eubank. Yes, Chris was also a feared and revered knockout machine, but predominantly famous for being the flashy showboater and the flamboyant opinion divider. Nevertheless though, he was of course a truly brilliant fighter. So the build up to the fight was a thing of beauty. Their rivalry played out on terrestrial TV and encapsulated the whole nation, but unlike some rivalries where you get the sense they're rather scripted or forced, this one had a real hostile feel to it. They may have been two very different personalities, but even so, it was an absolutely perfect gel.
On that particular night in question, I will show that I have what it takes. This man is nothing but, he's the real hype. I come up the hard way. I didn't have Frank Warren.
Myself, boy.
You had your time. Let's have some parliamentary procedure here, all right? I don't hate the man. I want the men's title, and I intend to prove that I'm a better fighter than the man, which I am.
All right, gentlemen, you both signed the contract. I personally do hate him.
So when fight night rolled around, there was a buzz in the air. Now, it's a mystery how he did it, but Team Nigel actually tried a couple of dirty tricks that night. He managed to sabotage Eubank's ring walk music, cutting off the song just after it started, but the professional as ever Eubank luckily weren't too phased. In fact, he was so confident in himself that he placed a 1,000 bet on a first round knockout, and as soon as the bell went, he bowled over like a crab and tried to cash in with the first punch. Okay, it didn't work, but either way, carnage ensued from then on.
They're both stand-up sluggers that he nailed.
Well, Ben just started to find his range at the end of the first round. He's found it. Ben's caught him again, but Eubank is taking these punches well, Reg.
A few twitchy backers around in this quite big audience. Oh, as you say, Jim, that's when he's dangerous, isn't he? Like a wounded animal.
Now in the fourth round, Eubank took a beastly uppercut to the chin that caused him to bite down on his tongue, leaving a severe gash in which a serious amount of blood was being swallowed. He actually hid the evidence from his corner because he was afraid of a doctor's stoppage, but anyway, from this point on, he knew he had to up the pace even more. Things were equally turmoil for Ben as well, because his eye was nearly swollen completely shut by the fifth round, and Eubank set about targeting this to impair his vision. Even so, the scores were fairly even when the fighters began the eighth round, but things were about to take a turn in Nigel Benn's favour.
To be a master of the noble art. Oh, what? Almost came out on our lap there, Jim. A little bit of a slip. He's arguing with the referee. It was a slip. But there's no point in him shouting at him because he got clipped at the same time.
Of course, Eubank protested that it was a slip, but regardless, a punch did land and took Nigel ahead on the scorecards. In hindsight though, this may have been the motivation that Chris needed, because in round 9 everything was about to change and he set about drawing a line under the whole thing.
I think he was falling for that.
That was Ben.
Oh, what a shot that
Shot
is.
really super.
Opened him up with the left hand and then shot the right hand over and it connected. There's the countdown. If he did go down, the count would continue.
Ben's shaking, Reg.
Oh, right to his boots, Jim.
Ben is shaking. The eyes watch Reg. This will be the finish of the belt.
And it's all over in the 9th round. And would you believe, in Ben's corner, they looked as though they were objecting to that for a minute. Why was it stopped?
He's the hardest puncher I've ever seen. He's the hardest puncher I've ever come up against in my life. I don't know. I beat him on determination. Karen, I told you I'd do it. Karen, can we get married now? Can we get married?
Listen, this is a new side.
Marry me, Karen.
So after the epic showdown, both men went their separate ways in the following years. Chris found himself amongst another fierce rivalry with Ben's former foe, the very dangerous Michael Watson, and he would go on to win both thrilling fights, though unfortunately tragic circumstances would come of it in the aftermath.
What a round! What a round! And he's down! He's straight up.
Here we have it. I think Watson's got to just cup his hands around his head like he's really in trouble here. Eubank is doing the wrong thing. What he's got to do here is he's got to tee Watson up, not throw a load of punches because he's too tired for that. Watson's got to go back to the Benn fight and keep his hands up. The referee's on the verge of stopping it. He stopped it.
Benn, on the other hand, also found a run of form, a flurry of wins and then a demolition of Galvano to claim the WBC World title. Then, despite a hiccup for Eubank in a draw against Ray Close, the rematch had now brewed almost perfectly. This time it was monumentally bigger and taking place at the historical Old Trafford Stadium. 42,000 in attendance and millions watching live on television. The fight was tipped to be every bit as brutal and exciting as the first. However, this time the style did not gel in quite the same way.
I mean, I quite enjoy the arrogance that Eubank brings into the ring. I think it's all part of the showmanship. It's on a peg or two. But a good right-hand lead from Eubank. See, Benn has...
Referee managing to keep out of the picture as much as possible here.
Pressure on it, no problem for Benn. He had a lazy 11th round. Eubank slipping on the canvas there. Left hook.
So it would take until the 12th round for the fight to finally light up, and upon the final bell, the general feeling ringside was that Nigel had done enough to get his revenge. The scorecards, on the other hand, would go on to tell a different story.
And now we've got the long wait now.
114, even a draw, the decision.
Yes, it's a draw. Well, we thought Ben just stole it, Jim, but we weren't a bit surprised by a drawn decision then.
Now, interestingly, this fight was a joint promotion between Barry Hearn, Frank Warren and the formidable Don King. Oh yes, and as you know, old Donny boy, when he makes a contract, the winner automatically gets signed to his roster, no questions asked. However, this fight ended up a draw. What a blinding result for Barry and Frank. They didn't lose access to their fighters. How convenient, eh? Anyway, on a serious note, there may be a bit of a story behind all this as to why the fight didn't quite live up to the first. After Eubank fought Watson, he was of course completely devastated at what had happened, and it took him quite a long time to come to terms with it. Prior to this fight, Chris had been on a knockout streak of 12 KOs in 14 fights. He was relentless in the ring, he was brutal and he was devastating. But after the unfortunate tragedy of the Watson fight, he would go on to have only 2 knockouts in his next 14 fights, all the way up until his first loss to Steve Collins. Obviously, only the man himself knows the truth, but it just looks like something may have been taken away from him that night. Maybe he lost a bit of that killer instinct or brutality and desire to finish the job. Of course, if this was the case, then understandably so. Incredibly, Nigel went on to give Gerald McClellan an unfortunate similar fate in 1995 in one of the most brutal fights in history. And it was almost as if their paths were lining up again and gearing towards that third fight. However, Father Time remains undefeated. One final similarity between the two would be their losses to Steve Collins, and then both men would end up calling it a day before the start of the millennium. Fans never got to see the trilogy they so desired. But roll on 13 years after Senior retired, roll on 20 years after Nigel hung up the gloves, and yes, their ambitious offsprings, eager to make the same impact as their fathers, would take over right from where they left off.
Oh, big power shots again, and Cole looks bedraggled once more. Jeff Hines is there as Cole goes down.
The big shot. Oh, great shot. Terrific right hand. And a terrific uppercut as well. This needs to be stopped. It needs to be stopped.
But of course, it wouldn't all be smooth sailing.
Going over to America and a right hand. Floors him in the first minute of the first round. Higher, much higher than this. And Ben trying to get his own right hands going, but back comes Payno again. And Ben just slips on the advertising hoarding. But he's being counted by Bob Williams.
That will see out this round, Payno, for you know, a remarkable, great shot from
Just
Conor
as you
Benn.
say that, a wonderful right hand from Conor Benn. Joe.
You've got to keep moving, you've got to keep spinning around, circling around Eubank. Don't stand in front of him out.
He's looking for them. Oh, he gets one, big uppercuts. That's a stumble. Sure. And Billy Joe is a hard boy himself. Great right hand.
Well done.
Billy Joe Saunders.
Now, the resurgence of Conor Benn would be monumental from this point on, but the Eubank story would be full of ups and downs, peaks and troughs, ultimately never reaching the same heights as his father. Then finally, when their nostalgic fight was signed, it was a case of Eubank falling short at world level and Conor never having challenged at world level. Aside from the obvious difference in natural size, on paper the fight was 50-50 flip of a coin, though sadly it wasn't meant to be.
Just one more question on the conversation with Chris Eubank. Did you reach out to him this morning? How was that conversation?
He fully believes, you know, he believes in me, and you know, it's not who I am, it's not what I'm about. You know, I'm a professional athlete, and you know, he was understanding.
We were looking forward to an event that has really captured the imagination of the British public, but obviously we wanted to come here today and formally announce that Chris Eubank Jr against Conor Benn has been officially postponed.
So yes, as we remember, it was a monumental fallout with serious politics in the background, and a rocky road ensued for Benn from that moment on. But now, 2.5 years later, here we are once again.
Eubank, the limit 160 pounds. The family feud goes on.
Tempers flaring there. I got that one wrong, didn't I?
The Conor Benn train rolled on undefeated, but the devastation he was causing beforehand now seems to be a thing of the past. Whereas the Eubank train got derailed by a world-class Liam Smith, nonetheless, he would go on to get his revenge soon after.
Oh, good shot. Cut from Eubank. Pulls Smith down. A rueful smile on his face. The gun shield. Eubank again just finding a home for that right hand. Smith backed up to the ropes. He cannot get out of the way at the minute. And Eubank sets those feet wide. He needs to pass. Eubank chopping down with the right. Smith trying to stay out of the way. And the referee has stepped in and stopped it. Liam Smith doesn't like it. But it's a decent decision, and revenge is sweet for Chris Eubank Jr.
And now, here we are.